Once inside Israel, the militants showing a high level of training and preparation.
Fuck Israel! Fuck Israel, man!
And those who are saying otherwise are either misinformed or misinforming.
Israel got attacked over the weekend. If you missed that story, I don't know what to tell you, but we'll talk a lot about it and a bunch of stuff related to that all coming up on this episode of Daily Caller Live. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for tuning in. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
Here we go!
That might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually their name, Jobob.
Live from the dingy bunker that is completely cut off from the outside world, except for you fine folks. My name is Jobob. This is Daily Caller Live. Thanks so much for tuning in on today. It is Monday, October 9th, the year of our Lord 2023. Not a lot of fun over the weekend, obviously, in terms of the news cycle. I myself had fantastic comedy shows in Arkansas and Tulsa, Oklahoma. But we're not talking about that today. Because we got to get to the big story, obviously, that's happening globally around the world and just how it interacts with the American political system and everything going on around there. Now, just as a baseline setup here, obviously, I am not an Israel expert. However, about almost exactly a year ago, my wife and I were in Sderot, which you probably heard is a city near Gaza that was under attack on Saturday and suffered a lot of casualties and a bunch of just horribleness at the hands of Hamas, the terrorist group. So that being said, again, not an Israel expert, but at the same time, I have a pretty good understanding, at least a cursory understanding, and hopefully am able to relay it in a way that everybody can kind of understand of what's going on there, having toured around the entire country, learned quite a bit about it. And I kind of thought today the best place to start is a very, very brief understanding of the overall conflict. In the 40s, after World War II, obviously, with terrible things happening to the Jewish community, Zionism begins. Zionism, the idea that the Jewish people would return to the homeland, which is now the nation state of Israel. 1948, Israel becomes its own country, and we won't get into the minutia of that, but since then, people who lived in the region and the new Israelis or people that have already been there or just the Jewish state of Israel as a whole have been in conflict. If you didn't know that, that's there you go. That very, very quickly tried to catch people up to speed. Now, obviously, there has been a lot of conflict in the Middle East. Every single U.S. president since, was it Hoover, has been trying to figure out a peaceful pact, if you will. Lots of people bring up two-state solutions. We won't get into all of the politics behind that, but just to set up the idea of the reason why I think a lot of, the reason why Hamas and other terrorist groups, Hezbollah, is so upset constantly is because they feel like they've been displaced. And that is what I think, that along with other religious components, is what stokes the fire for them to go do the horrible, terrible things that they did. Now, I'm not in any way trying to justify that. I'm just trying to get a broader sense of how and why this stuff happened. Now, fast forward to Saturday, Hamas from the Gaza Strip invades a border town called Sderot in Israel, among a couple other different places. I want to play you the clip that the Today Show was having on their broadcast this morning to kind of give a brief outline. This is Richard Engel, who is this is Richard Engel, who is in Sderot, the border town in Israel that was under attack. Now, a couple different parallels here, and again, I don't really want to get into the politics of it, but it's kind of unavoidable, especially the parallels with the United States and our current border situation. But here's just kind of a brief summary of what happened on Saturday before we kind of get into how that affects the United States. Check it out.
At 6:30 Saturday morning, under the cover of a massive rocket barrage, hundreds of Hamas fighters blasted their way through the fences around Gaza and flew over Israeli defenses in paragliders. Once inside Israel, the militants, showing a high level of training and preparation, went on a killing spree. Israeli media say, in all, more than 700 Israelis are dead, including more than 100 soldiers and police. Many of the dead, nearly 300, were at an all-night dance party near Gaza.
Goes without saying, absolutely horrible what happened in Israel at the hands of Hamas. Now, I think what a lot of people are trying to get at is, well, in terms of the now PR battle, because that's what these things come down to. It happened in Ukraine, obviously. It's happening in Israel. There's now a PR battle, and PR is just as much of a battle as is the actual on the ground. I don't know if I want to say that, but it is a huge component in modern warfare. And considering how the lefty Free Palestine people are going to react to Israeli reaction, a lot of stuff coming up front is preparing people for what they're going to see. Ben Shapiro probably put it in the most concise way. He said this: raping, mutilating, kidnapping, all of these are war crimes. So is hiding behind civilians. Every ounce of blood spilt in Gaza, and he's talking about the Israeli reaction to what Hamas did on Saturday, is on Hamas and its Iranian paymasters, every single ounce. In other words, the PR effort is to get out in front, and this is obvious, but when Israel responds, and they should, and not only should, they have to respond, there's going to be backlash of, look at how bad the Israelis are, and kind of completely wash over the horribleness that happened on Saturday. And I think guys like Shapiro and a bunch of my friends out there are saying, look, none of this needed to happen, but they decided to start a conflict, and everything that happens after this conflict is initiated by Hamas is the fault of the initiators, which, I mean, again, that just makes sense. Obviously, people have deep felt feelings of either pro-Israel or free Palestine, but at the bottom line, if you try to even be just objective about it, of course Israel is going to respond. They have to, just because what happens if you don't? And so all the people like Shapiro are saying is that, look, nobody wanted to do the things that Israel is going to do and is about to do and is currently doing. But what other choice do they have? And I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. Now, I did want to watch another clip from that Today Show, because there's some verbiage that's used that kind of indicates the media's swing back to, well, look at how bad the Israelis are. And again, I don't know how intentional it is, but I thought the language from Richard Engel of NBC was interesting. And that's, again, not to diminish, he is in a tough spot at the moment, just like so many other people. But I did think this was interesting. Check this out.
Israel's payback is underway, with the army carrying out airstrikes across the Gaza Strip this morning, targeting Hamas infrastructure and smuggling tunnels. But Israeli reprisals are, for now, constrained because Hamas is holding dozens of Israeli hostages hidden deep inside Gaza. Israel didn't anticipate Hamas had this capacity, and Israel's intelligence network missed the signs that it was coming.
So the word used there that I kind of was like, I don't know if that's the correct terminology for what's happening, is he said Israel's payback. And I guess, yeah, you can think about it that way, but I guess I don't, payback, the word payback in my mind seems like vengeance. And I get it. I get the feeling of like vengeance and being able to avenge the terrible things that happen. But at the same time, I think it's even further than that. I genuinely think it's a necessity that Israel has to go do all of the things that I guarantee you they don't want to do. Nobody wants to go in and level buildings and put civilians in harm's way. Nobody wants to do that. But to say, okay, well, this is Israel's payback, I don't like the way that feels, because it really is more of a necessity. Hey, in order to maintain our way of life, but also just ability to be alive, we have to do this. That's the way I look at it from Israel's standpoint. And that's, I think, generally the objective standpoint. And so to say that it's some sort of payback is, I don't know. I don't like that terminology. But again, I don't know how intentional it was. But here's some other stuff that I think is kind of interesting. Israel has put out several press releases to the people in Gaza. Civilians get out of the majorly populated areas. Gaza is a densely populated, not all that big piece of land. Maybe I should have brought a map, but I feel like everybody knows where the Gaza Strip is. And Israeli officials and Israeli military have said, all civilians, please evacuate the areas that you're going to see some danger happening. While Hamas has said, no, everybody stay. And I feel like that, if anything, should be the lone and sole indicator of who's actually in it to protect civilian lives. Israel saying, get out. We have to, in order to protect our way of life, do some things that I don't think anybody wants to do. But in that process, all of the civilians that don't want to be caught up in this leave. Whereas Hamas is saying, no, everybody stay. And the reason they're saying that is because they're using human shields to then wage, like what I was talking about, the PR battle. Hamas is saying women and children stay behind in this very dangerous area. And when Israel does what it has to do, they're going to say, look, at the Israelis killed a bunch of women and children. And again, I don't mean to make light of it, but that's just how it's going to work out. And it's up to the media and the people that are critiquing the situation to be able to understand that unless this is provoked, none of this happens. So there's that. I also wanted to bring up, well, let me go to this first. This is our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. Oh, shoot, that LOLs is not supposed to be that chyron there. Forgot to change that. Sorry about that. But this is Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, on Meet the Press over the weekend, responding to the, I forget her name, the hostess, the Meet the Press. Sorry. Talking about the funding that Iran got from the United States. Now, if you don't know anything about Hamas, to the south of the Israeli region, and then Hezbollah to the north out of Lebanon, they are funded heavily by Iran, who, again, this doesn't probably need to be repeated because everybody knows it, but Iran is on the forefront of the death to America thing. So Hezbollah to the north and Hamas to the south of Israel are funded entirely by Iran. And so, to her credit, the Meet the Press host asked Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, hey, there's some criticism. Did the money that we gave to Iran or unfroze from Iran in exchange for 5 American hostages have anything to do with this? Several reports are saying yes, it has. Also, there's a bunch of reports saying that Hamas has American-made weapons that were left behind in Afghanistan, but that's a whole different thing that we can talk about in a little bit. But she asked our Secretary of State this, and this was his answer. Not cool. Check it out.
Seen a cent of that money, but how do you respond to Republican critics who say that that deal funded the attacks on Israel?
Well, it's very unfortunate that some are playing politics at a time when so many lives have been lost and Israel remains under attack. Here are the facts. The facts are that these were not U.S. taxpayer dollars. These were Iranian resources that it had accumulated from the sale of its oil that were stuck in a bank in South Korea from day one, under our law, under our sanctions, going back many years. It's always had the right to use those funds for humanitarian purposes, for food, for medicine, for medical equipment. The funds were moved from one bank to another where it could more easily do that, but under the close supervision of the U.S. Treasury Department.
Mr. Secretary, I don't want...
No, it's important. It's important to get these facts right, because here's what's going on. Again, not a single cent has been spent from that account. When any money is spent from that account, it can only be used for medical supplies, for food, for medicine. And those who are saying otherwise are either misinformed or misinforming, and it's wrong either way.
Maybe the LOLs thing is appropriate there, because I didn't. In a recently deleted tweet, the Secretary of State also tweeted this: Turkish Foreign Minister and I spoke further on Hamas's terrorist attacks in Israel. I encourage Turkey's advocacy for a ceasefire and release of all hostages held by Hamas immediately. Then he goes around talking about a ceasefire. I think the thing that we think about Antony Blinken already is being proven second by second. I think a lot of people kind of think he's a spineless, weak person who has a lot of power as the Secretary of State of the United States. And that weakness is on full display in how he's responding to the terrible events of this Saturday by Hamas. Calling for a ceasefire is, I don't even know, it's not even weak. It's almost idiotic. And that's not from a, look, there's a lot of people out there justifiably who are saying, well, there needs to be some sort of revenge or payback, I guess, if the word you want to use, from Israel to Hamas. But again, I don't even think it's that. I think it's necessity. Israel going into Gaza via airstrikes or ground it is a necessity at this point, in order so that more horribleness from Iranian-funded Hamas is to stop that from happening. Right, so to say that, well, we're calling for a ceasefire because vengeance is not the way, which is, I think, what the Secretary of State is saying, it is not even like, it's beyond weak. It's like idiotic. Like, you can't, there's a revenge component, there's a seeking justice component, but I don't even think that that's like the driving force or what it should be. The driving force is, this is necessary to keep more of it. They've already shown what they're capable of and or what they're willing to do. It is now necessary for us to use our intelligence, our strength, our power, our military might, and violence to make sure that that doesn't happen more. So calling for a ceasefire is, in my opinion, not even weak. It's just flat out idiotic, or at least proving the fact that there's zero understanding of how this stuff has to play out. That tweet has since been deleted, which is a thing in and of itself. The administration walking back statements from the Secretary of State is a pretty big deal. But I also, just to get back to the question that they asked on Meet the Press, we've talked about this a number of times. If Republicans do something that Democrats don't like, the media questioning is, why did Republicans do this bad thing? if Democrats do something that Republicans don't like, the way that that question is phrased is Republicans are accusing Democrats of doing this bad thing. And that's how that question was phrased here. But at the same time, Meet the Press did push back on saying, hey, look, this money is fungible. In other words, okay, well, Iran just realized, okay, well, we have $5 billion to do or whatever, the stuff that we already need to do in terms of like pave our streets, provide medical care and food to our people. We have to do that anyway, says Iran. We now know we have $5-6 billion in this account, so that frees up some of the other money to go do this. In other words, money is fungible, and I'm glad she pushed back, and I'm not glad of how Anthony Blinken answered that. Check
about
this
the
out.
argument that money is fungible. So Iran may have known this money is coming and used other funds to help fund this attack that happened.
Iran has unfortunately always used and focused its funds on supporting terrorism, on supporting groups like Hamas. And it's done that when there have been sanctions. It's done that when there haven't been sanctions. And it's always prioritized that. And again, I come back to the proposition that these funds have always been, under the law, available to Iran to use for humanitarian purposes.
Yeah. The question, and I heard this from a guy on the radio earlier this morning, the question is he stupid or does he think we are all stupid? That is not a way to answer that question. Oh, Iran is always doing crazy things. Okay, then why did we give them $5 billion? How does that make sense? If the stance from the administration is, well, Iran is always funding this sort of stuff, then why are you going to give them money? And the claim that he's making of, well, this money strictly, the money that we gave them strictly can only be spent from this account to do humanitarian efforts across Iran. And that, again, is he stupid or does he think we're stupid? Obviously, I think it's the latter. I think he thinks the American people are so dumb they don't understand the ability for money to be used for different purposes when we give money. And I think the bottom line here is it is not a good look that the Biden administration, again, gave, $6 billion to a country that is funding terrorist organizations like Hamas that did such damage over the weekend in one of America's allies. Now, I want to address, I think, another thing that I'm seeing online and on social media from a bunch of conservatives, Republicans. I don't know terminology, but immediately online the similarity was drawn between Ukraine and Israel. I think that is a ridiculous similarity to draw, especially if you're going to go to it immediately without kind of fully understanding the scope. And what it's been is a bunch of people that I generally agree with on a lot of things are out there saying Israel's just going to become the next Ukraine, which is, I think, an attempt for people to shoot their mouth off without fully understanding the massive differences. Now, look, take out all of the emotional stuff. Take out the Israeli people have been longtime American allies, and we support them in their right to exist and live in a culture that they design. Take all of that stuff out and just look at it from a strategic American position. When we talk foreign policy, we do a lot around the world to maintain order effectively. And if you look at it strictly from American strategy, Ukraine, and I'm not really even taking sides here on Ukraine versus Israel, but they're just different. Ukraine is defending a philosophy, defending an idea, which, you can have your thoughts on what is good and what isn't. But Americans backing Ukraine is saying to the rest of the world that a country cannot invade a sovereign country and take land and take it over effectively, which is what Putin seems to be trying to do. That is defending an idea, defending a philosophy. And I agree with that idea in a lot of ways. But it is not the same as the United States defending Israel, because in the same way that it's also defending the same sort of philosophy and the same sort of idea, there's a geographical strategic advantage for the United States to be allied with Israel. Like, again, Ukraine and Russia, not even getting into whether or not we should be giving them money, but it's an idea, it's a philosophy that one country can't just invade another country. Israel, if you look at a map, is situated perfectly, and I don't know if perfectly is the right word, but it's situated between the Middle East, which a bunch of U.S. enemies exist in that region, and the Mediterranean, which is the gateway to Europe. So remove all of the emotional components. You have a country that effectively is a barrier from enemies of the Western world to the Western world, just from a geographical position. If you give Syria, Jordan, I don't know necessarily Jordan, but if you give a lot of those Middle Eastern countries effectively access to the Mediterranean by way of the land mass or the land that is Israel, you have a lot of bigger problems. At least that's what I believe. And so America has a strategic geographical incentive to protect that area. Again, this is all of the emotions moved, and I don't necessarily think you should remove all the emotions. But even if you go based on just that, there is comparing. What I got at ultimately was conservatives or people on the right or whatever. Again, I don't even want to call them that, saying, well, no more money to this. This is just the military-industrial complex. It's just different. And I think people shooting off their mouth saying, well, no money to Ukraine and therefore no more money to Israel. They're not the same thing. And to pretend that they are, I think, is short-sighted. And it's just attention-seeking at this point. That's what I think. More kind of speaking out, I guess, against the people that are generally on my side of things. I think it's short-sighted. I don't think it's really thought through that position. And I think it's pretty severely only for attention. But I think lastly, before we kind of wrap this up, and I know we talked about this the whole time, but this is a big deal. I want to get to this. So in just American culture and how we view this, the Israeli-Palestine conflict, there were big rallies in New York City over the weekend talking about pro-Palestine rhetoric. There's a lot of pro-Palestine energy around the country, in small pockets, thankfully, but I think it should be pointed out that people saying things like, well, Israel had it coming, or what did they expect? That is a fringe, some would say, extremist idea. And I only bring that up because people on the right are often called extremists for having a majority-held view. Like the majority of America, we live in a center-right country. And so a lot of people on the right have ideologies and beliefs that are called extremist beliefs by your mainstream media outlets, when in reality, probably the majority, or at least a plurality of Americans, agree with those ideas. And yet, when people are in the streets protesting, like the video that you're about to see, who represent a very small fraction of American societies, probably relegated entirely to American lefty universities, when they express, well, Israel had it coming to them, or what did they expect? That actually is a fringe idea, and something that, if you want to look in terms of just the definition of extremism, that's probably what it is. But for some reason, that's totally okay and acceptable. Even, again, Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer, Democrats, pretty far to the left, are saying they stand with Israel. So if you're going to make the case of, well, they had it coming, you're an extremist by definition. And again, I only bring that up because of how many people on the right are called, quote unquote, extremists incorrectly for having a majority view. Nevertheless, this is what some of the scenes that happened in New York City over the weekend. I think these people are just flat out wrong. Again, I'm trying to take the emotional component out of it. I think from a moral standpoint, this is like a disgusting show of what's happening for the pro-Palestine side. I also don't think the pro-Palestine side is doing themselves any benefit by supporting Hamas. Like, it's crazy. But a couple scenes from New York City, and then we'll wrap it up. Check it out.
Fuck Israel! Fuck Israel, man!
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free.
This is a much longer discussion on where this whole geographical area. There's so many things to talk about and discuss in this. I feel like there's I don't know. It's too difficult, and maybe we'll do like a long form thing with some of my I don't know, more knowledgeable friends on this topic. But the whole idea of supporting Hamas because you're a free Palestine person is crazy to me, and that appears to be the stance of the people that decided to be in the streets of New York City. I think closing here. This is probably most adequately defines a lot of people. Now, I thought this was one of the more interesting tweets. Somebody named Cassie Dillon, not sure who she is necessarily, but she tweeted this in response to the Hamas attack out of Gaza on Israel. The most liberal pro-two-state solution Jews I know are now calling for Gaza to become a parking lot, which should give a pretty good view into how people are thinking about this and how awful Hamas attacks on the Israeli state have been. So obviously, we'll keep an eye on this. This, I think, is a massive story globally. It's going to get uglier before it gets better, and I think that's kind of the reality of it, and that's part of the kind of the PR war that's going to be happening over the next several weeks until the unrest has been settled. So wild time. Let me see. Any comments that are worth reading? Not really, and I also can't read too much of it. But anyways, we'll probably talk more about Israel tomorrow as things kind of unfold and things continue to happen. But we will see you tomorrow probably. This is another one of those where like I'm on a flight. Charlie Kirk and I will be tomorrow in Orlando. And then Thursday, Candace Owens and I will be in Atlanta. So another one of those weeks where hopefully we'll be with you, but who knows? Flights, crazy airport schedules, all that sort of stuff. So appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. We'll see you next time. God bless America.